Okay.
Okay na.
Okay na. Okay, good day everyone. Kumusta naman ang weekend nyo? Ano mga
Problemado, sir.
pinagkabalaan nyo?
Problemado, sir.
Bakit?
Yung
Ang
research,
daming activities.
dami. Tapos,
Si ano?
daming pending.
Si,
Si ma'am, ano?
si ano? Basta yun, no? O ikaw, Nard. J. Nard, atangan.
Sir, ano po, busy sa training basketball.
Ikaw, J. Mark dyan.
Ako naman sir, naglaan lang ng oras sa aming simbahan dahil kapistahan ng banal na sa tatlo kapon.
Ano pala ito? Okay, start na tayo. Before we start, may ask Mark dyan to lead the prayer muna.
Sige sir. Pangalan ng Ama, ng Anak, ng Espiritu Santo. Amen. Lord, salamat po sa araw-araw na buhay na ipinagkakaloob mo sa bawat isa sa amin. Salamat po sa mga taong nakakasalubungan namin na siyang magiging dahilan upang maging daluyan ng biyaya mula sa iyo. Mga Panginoon, patuloy niyo kaming gabayan sa aming pang-araw-araw na buhay. Bigyan kami ng sapat na kaalaman at kalakasan para makapamuhay ng sapat sa mundong ibinigay mo sa amin. Ito ang dalangin sa matamis sa pangalan ni Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mark John. Our lesson for today is Philippine literature and history. Literature and history are inherently intertwined. Sabi nga nila, ang umiiral na literature ay sumasalamin sa kalagayang panlipunan o panahon. Ito ay nakda. Good day. I am your teacher for today. And today we are going to journey through Philippine history on the perspective of literature. But before that, mag-icebreaker muna tayo. Ito ay Bugtungang Bayan. For number 1, let's have Gail.
I don't know if this is correct. Batong marmol na buto, binalot ng gramatiko. I think I've heard of it na dati, but I can't remember where. I think the answer here is ngipin.
Ngipin. Okay, ngipin is correct. Thank you. And number 2, Jaynard.
Bulaklak muna ang dapat gawin bago mo ito kainin. Tama. Na-encounter ko na din to before. I think saging yung sagot.
Okay, saging is correct. And for number 3, our last number, Mark John.
I'm not familiar sa bugtong-bugtong pero subukan ko. Nabibis araw-araw, nag-iiba ng pangalan. Kalendaryo, sir.
Okay. Calendario is correct. Thank you. Let's start our lesson. Dimension of... hindi. Mag-recall pa lang muna tayo. Dimension of Philippine literature through history. At the end of this lesson, the learners are expected to, number 1, please read Mark Jan. Ikaw, frente.
Familiarize with the various characteristics of each Philippine literary period.
Thank you. Next, Chris, please read number 2.
Understand the different dimensions of Philippine literature in different historical periods.
Thank you. Number 3, Kadwa.
Analyze a portrait from pre-colonial period.
Next, Jaynard.
Number 4, utilize the use of multimedia as an extension of student learning.
Okay, and last, Gail.
Create a reflection about the discussed lesson and assessments accomplished.
Okay. Thank you. Before we start our lesson, let's have a recall. I have prepared these questions and I would like you to answer. Number one, who wrote Noli Me Tangere? Mark John and El
Dr.
Pili
Jose
pala.
P.
Uh,
Dr. Jose P. Rizal.
Correct. And why were those novels written, Jaynard?
Um, Nasulat yung Elfili and Noli para i-expose yung pang-aabuso ng mga Kastila.
Okay, correct. And isinulat sa wikang Espanyol or sa wikang Kastila para hindi maintindihan ng maraming Pilipino ang layunin ni Rizal na payag ang kwento ng mga kanluran niya. Okay, and last, what was the nature of Philippine literature before the arrivals of Spaniards? Gail?
Before the arrival of Spaniards, I think this is a pre-Hispanic Philippine literature. It is that era was actually epics passed on from generation to generation, originally through an oral tradition.
Okay, that's correct, and thank you for answering. We will discuss 8 periods of Philippine literature history. Uh, Take a good look of these pictures since each of them represents one period. And let's proceed with number one. Chris, can you please read the slide?
Pre-Spanish literature, folk tales, the epic age, and folk songs.
The pre-Spanish literature. Bago pa man dumating ang mga Kastila, may sarili na tayong sibilisasyon. At may sarili na tayong literature. One of the most famous forms of literature at this time was folktales. These are made up stories about life, adventure, love, horror, and humor, where one can derive lessons. An example of this is The Moon and the Sun. Epics were also common. Isang halimbawa ng anito ay ang Biag ni Lamang. Epics are a series of heroic achievements or events, usually of a hero. Epics are usually lengthy. Isa sa mga pinakamatandang anyo ng literature sa Pilipinas ay ang folk songs. Many of these have 12 syllables. Examples which are Kundiman, Kumintang, o Tagumpay, ang Dilato Imno, ang Unyayi o Hele, Diana, Soliraning, and Talindaw. Uh, Next slide. Gail, can you please read?
Okay. 333 years, Spanish influence, recreational place, period of enlightenment, period of propaganda.
Okay. Then the Spaniards came. For 333 years. They were perhaps one of the biggest, if not the biggest, influence that shaped different aspects of Philippines, including literature. Spanish influence include alphabet. Before they came, Filipinos used alibata. Then the alphabet switched to Roman alphabet as part of Spanish teachings. Christian doctrines are also influenced the literature. Moreover, European legends and traditions brought here came assimilated in our songs, corridos and moromoros. Ano, nauso rin sa mga panahong ito ang recreational plays. There were many recreational plays performed by Filipinos during the Spanish times. Almost all of them were in poetic form, such as Sinakulo, Panuluyan, Salubong, Zarzuela. The period of enlightenment lasted from 1872 until 1898. In these times, Filipino intellectuals educated in Europe called ilustrados began to write about the hitch of colonization, Coexisting with the period of Enlightenment was the propaganda movement from 1872 to 1896. The movement was spearheaded from mostly by intellectual middle class like Jose Rizal, Marcelo del Pilar, Gershano Lopez Haena, Antonio Luna, Mariano Ponce, Jose Maria Panganiban, and Pedro Paterno. Rizal's writing include Noli Me Tangere, Mi Ultimo Adios, Sobre la Indolencia de los Filipinos and Filipinas dentro de 100 años. Del Pilar's writings include pag-ibig na sa tinubuang lupa or love of country, kaingat kayo or be careful, and dasalan at tuksuhan, prayers and jokes. Uh, Fray Botod, ang Fray Botod la Hija del Fraile or the child of the friar and everything is humbug, everything is mutual sa mga Pilipino noong 1891. And we all know the Spaniards sold us to the America. Next, the American regime. Please read Jaynard. Wala. Ikaw na lang, Gail.
Okay. The American Resume. English language dominance. Lamentations of Tagalog writers.
Ayun nga, as we all know, na binenta nga tayo ng mga Espanyol sa Amerika after nung 333 years of occupation. During the American regime, Americans made Filipinos use English extensively. It was also during the American regime where Jose Garcia Villa became famous for his free verse. However, the languages used in writing during this period were still Spanish and Tagalog, and the dialects of different regions. But the writers in Tagalog continued in their lamentations of the condition of the country and their attempts to arouse love for one's native tongue, and the writers in English imitated the themes and methods of the Americans. Next slide, please read. Mm, Mark John. Mark John.
World War II. The Tribune and the Philippine Review, Haiku and the Tagalog Revive.
Okay, thank you. World War II saw the Japanese occupy the Philippines. Philippine literature was interrupted in its development during this time. Philippine literature in English came to a halt. This led to all newspapers not to be circulated in the community, except for Tribune and the Philippine Review. Haiku is one of the most common forms of poetry during this time, along with Tanaga and Karaniwang Anyo, or usual form. Next slide, please read Kadwa.
Period of activism and period of the new society. Youth, youth activism, economic progress, discipline, culture, tourism, magazines, and comics.
Okay, thank you. The period of activism and period of new society. The period of activism and period of new society saw an increase in youth activism, mainly inspired by the ills in the society. People became vocal of their criticisms against the government and took to the streets for demonstration and sidewalk expressions. The period of new society started on September 21, 1972. Poems dealt with patience, regard for native culture, customs, and beauties of nature and surroundings. Newspapers took a new form, and economics, progress, discipline, culture, and tourism prevailed in the news. It was also during the time when magazines and comics became famous among Filipinos. Next slide, please read, Chris.
Period of the Third Republic. Martial law lifted. Literature of grief, poverty, aspiration for freedom, love of God, of country, and fellow men.
Okay, thank you. Period of the Third Republic. It started in the same year martial law was lifted. The Philippines became a new nation, and this former President Marcos called the new Republic of the Philippines. Poems during this period of the Third Republic were romantic and revolutionary. Many Filipino songs dealt with themes that were true to life, like those of grief, poverty, aspirations for freedom, love of God, of country, and fellow man. Next slide, please read, Jaynard.
Post EDSA 1, songs, newspapers, speeches, and even in the television programs increase in new newspapers.
Okay, thank you. Post EDSA 1. The successful People Power 1 in EDSA in 1985 brought huge chances in Filipino literature, as well as new Filipino songs, newspaper speeches, and even in television programs. More newspapers also experienced increased circulation, including the Inquirer, Malaya, and the People's Journal. And ito na yata yung last slide natin. I-dismiss ko rin kayo ng maga kasi may errands pang. Okay, for the last slide, please read Mark Jan.
21st century period. The ICT, the new codes and lingo, exposure to wider range of influence.
Okay, thank you. 21st century period. 21st century period saw the extensive integration of ICT in literature, ebooks, songs, films, and other cultural works became more accessible, especially because of the internet. Easier ways of communication led to the development of language variations, new words, codes, and lingos. More exposure to more cultural influence also affected literature and the subject of new works. Okay, we're tapos na tayo sa lesson. Para sa assignment naman, bigyan na ako assignment sa inyo kasi subject ng yung lesson natin ngayon. Your assignment will be read the Filipino folktale, The Sun and Moon, and answer the following questions. Okay, yun lang. May mga questions ba kayo?
So far, none po.
Okay. Yes, Gail?
Saan po ipapasa yung assignment, sir?
Ano, picture nyo na lang ay tasisan nyo isulat nyo na sa one whole sheet of paper.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Any other questions? I think wala na. yeah, that's all for today's class. And thank you for attending. Yun lang.
Thank
Thank
you,
you po,
sir.
Thank you
sir.
Thank you
po.
po.
Salamat po, sir.
Okay, class dismiss.